just going to ask a couple questions to get the process started, and then I'll turn it over to the audience to ask the panelists either individually or as a group additional questions. A couple of you have mentioned standards efforts, and I guess I would be interested. I'd say this is probably a two-part question. One is, what aspects of smart grid do you think are the ones that are most critical to be subject to some type of standards effort? And the second part of the question is we have such diverse constituencies in the smart grid universe. There are municipalities, there are electrical utilities, there are technology solution providers, renewable energy companies, and state and national governments as well. What do you think the response is of those different parties to standards efforts? So I'd ask whoever's interested in talking a little bit about standards.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I have a good story about standards, which is, several people have talked today about demand management, and especially using home area networks to eventually, with the smart home, allow homes to automatically respond to load management requests. And the reason that I think that that's an interesting area for standards, where it's actually critical, is because there's this huge dynamic between consumers who are pretty much uncontrollable in terms of what they're going to do and what they're going to plug in and unplug in their house and where they're going to install their 10-foot flat screen television that's also an RF block, a bunch of stuff like that. And the necessity of actually, when you get an advanced metering infrastructure connected to home area networks that's capable of doing automatic demand response, then the security standards in every inch of that distribution network are really critical, because you could actually start blowing up transformers by spoofing demand management requests and causing really big changes in the load too fast for the transmission distribution system to adapt to. So that that's really a vulnerability that didn't exist in the grid before, but it's incredibly important. When I was at Grid Week last week, I asked a question about that in one of the panels, on which there was a representative of the Department of Homeland Security, and he answered the question by pounding the table and said consumers cannot control the software on these intelligent devices. It has to be regulated. So I think that the advanced metering infrastructure is going to, we've got to get the security and software distribution standards out ahead of deployments, or we're going to introduce a new vulnerability into the network.
Well, I was going to comment, one of the things there are at least 50 companies making smart meters of one kind or another. And they're not, many of them don't talk to each other. So from the utility point of view and from the customer point of view, you'd like to have some standard interfaces at least, so that the utility is not locked into a single supplier or a single system. Now, that may or may not, depending on your point of view as a manufacturer, be desirable. I can see it argued both ways, and there'll be conflicts of interest there. But that at least is one issue, and another one is it's clear that the standards have got to be written in such a way they're adaptable, so as the technology continues to develop, you've got a way of working backwards in the compatibility issues to deal with what's there. So I understand there's something like 17 standards committees that are working on this matter, and they're probably going to come up with things that don't work together. And I've been on a couple of standards committee, and I'll tell you point blank, I haven't got a strong enough bottom to sit on those panels. I wiggle like a 3-year-old, and so it's going to take some people with some real patience and diplomacy in order to make those things come through. And our problem is, our political problem is, how do we get this done fast enough to do us some good? Standards that are too late get ignored, and if they're too early, they lock you out of technology and development. So there's some real issues in how we get there in a reasonable way in order to allow this technology for the smart grid to develop.
I was really impressed by the amount of practical experience, frankly, that the four of you and your companies have with live deployment of smart grid. Do you see the primary technical challenge as an integration challenge, as a challenge related to refining existing technologies, or do you think that there really are some hard problems where there simply currently are no viable solutions that are critical elements of the overall infrastructure?
Can I answer that based on the last question combined with this one? Because different approaches to the smart grid. There's one that's just like, how do you control the distribution network, and that's been done for 40 years now. Utilities are pretty savvy about how to control it. What's happening now is all these new things are coming online. It's like plug hydroelectric vehicles are coming around the pipe, demand response, automated demand response, where in large scale you want to have lots of homes responding. Even smart appliances could participate, so there's this transactive grid. When we were having our Grid-Wise Architecture Council initial meetings, we had several members that really raised the flag that you really can't get to this transactive smart grid if you don't have standards that have pricing mechanisms. So how do you actually participate? If you are a distributed energy resource or a demand response resource, or you plug your car into the grid and you want it to interact with the grid, it's all fine and dandy to talk about how to control it, but if you don't know, if the end devices don't know how to respond and have no signal, and one of the issues that keeps coming up over and over again in this industry is that there's maybe it's a policy issue, maybe it's a standard, but there's no real uniform pricing mechanism that says, if I'm going to participate in the grid, here's how to do it. I think it's back in 2000, FERC was talking about sort of a uniform, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a uniform way for demand response devices to participate in the grid. That failed because every utility and every state had their different views and political ideas. And until that happens, though, I think that it's really going to be, the smart grid's going to be controlled by lots of information, but still not a lot of signals telling things how to be part of the grid solution. You really have to have a pricing mechanism to participate. And I usually think that's the big missing link of the smart grid. The technology part, that we have lots of really good technology right now, but we don't have any way to figure out how to participate in it.
If I could just add a wrinkle to that, real quickly, we were talking to some people from the California ISO a couple of weeks ago, and they are already talking about an analog